After the death of his beloved wife Ella, Wilmer Castro, the head of a food company, believed he could never find love or happiness again. But as people often say, grief lasts for 3 years. Besides, Anna, Wilmer's mother, often encouraged her son, saying, "Dear, your son needs a mother, and you should keep living. I hope that one day you will find a good woman who will become a good wife for you and a good mother for our little Tao." One day, the young widower met Ingrid, and after a week, he realized she was the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Ingrid quickly bonded with his 6-year-old son, Tao, which greatly supported their relationship. A couple of months later, Wilmer proposed to Ingrid, and they had a beautiful wedding. Anna was delighted. "Now I'm not afraid to die," said the elderly mother. "You and Tao are in good hands." "What are you talking about, Mom?" snorted Wilmer. "Stop talking nonsense. Ingrid and I haven't given you a granddaughter yet, and you'll certainly dance at Tao's wedding." After their honeymoon in the Seychelles, the newlyweds began their family life, which Wilmer described as beautiful. Unfortunately, after a while, Wilmer faced a serious problem. Tao started getting sick too often, and his father couldn't understand why. Despite Ingrid's love for the boy and the careful environment she created for him, it didn't help. One illness followed another, a runny nose, a sore throat, or even bronchitis. "Why don't we send him to a health camp?" Ingrid suggested. "But Tao has never been away from home for so long," Wilmer thoughtfully replied. "Well, you know there's a first time for everything," his wife said. "Yes, but not at 6 years old," Wilmer objected. "It seems a little early for him to be far away from his family alone." "I understand your concern, but I disagree. It will be good for Tao. He'll become more independent, and most importantly, he'll get some fresh air and a change of environment. Have you considered that life in the city may not be suited for him?" "No, I hadn't thought about that," Wilmer said, shaking his head. "Honey, I'm totally confused. I don't understand anything anymore. Everything was fine with him before, but now he's constantly sick. I try my best to prevent him from viruses, but all in vain," Ingrid said, sobbing and wiping tears from her eyes. "I'm watching Tao's diet and regularly airing his room. I don't want to keep him far away from us because I love him, but I can't see his suffering anymore. My heart aches for the poor boy. Wouldn't it make sense to air his room less often? I think it's too chilly in there," Wilmer suggested. "That's not a problem," replied the young wife. "It's worse for him when it's very hot. And fresh air reduces germs. But you know I'm not a doctor, and in the camp, Tao will be under the care of specialists." "Well, maybe you're right," Wilmer said thoughtfully. "Perhaps a health camp is not such a bad idea. Okay, I'll think about it. Thank you, my dear, for all you do for my son." The loving father started exploring various options for children's recreation centers. Soon he found something suitable for Tao and promptly contacted the camp administration. "We have an individualized approach for each child," said a woman with a pleasant, well-pitched voice. "The minimum length of stay is 2 months." 2 months. Wilmer repeated with a slumped voice. Although he didn't fully understand the necessity of this trip, he wasn't ready to be apart from his son for even a whole month. "Yes, 2 months," the administrator confirmed. "But don't worry, you can visit your child on any day that is convenient for you." "Well, that's not so bad," Wilmer replied. "And how do I sign up?" The administrator explained all the necessary details, and that was it. All that was left was to mentally prepare Tao for the trip. After all, the kid was going to be away from home for 2 months. But to Wilmer's surprise, Tao's eyes lit up. "Will I play there with other kids?" the boy asked excitedly, and his father sighed. Yes, he understood pretty well that Tao lacked communication with his peers. He used to go to school, but as soon as a series of colds began, Wilmer took his son out. So Ingrid was right. A kids' health camp was a great idea, no matter how you looked at it. However, a week before the departure, the boy complained of a severe headache. Putting his hand on his son's forehead, Wilmer shrieked. Tao's forehead was as hot as a stove. The thermometer showed a temperature of almost 40 degrees Celsius. "Oh God, this is the last thing we need," the father muttered in despair and sank into a chair. "What's wrong?" Ingrid asked as she entered, hearing her husband's last words. "Tao is sick again," Wilma said, "and it seems quite serious." The young woman stared intently at her stepson and furrowed her brow. Tao's face turned red, and sweat started to appear on his forehead. "It looks like we'll have to postpone the trip," Wilma said. "And now we are going to the doctor." "Are you sure?" "We still have a week before we leave. Maybe he'll get better," Ingrid said. However, the next day, Tao showed no signs of improvement, and the doctor said the trip was no longer an option. "I would strongly recommend you get a qualified nurse," the doctor added. "I see, thank you." "Why do we need a nurse?" Ingrid exclaimed as the doctor left. "Why do we need a stranger in the house?" "Do you know anything about medicine?" Wilma interrupted her. When it came to his son, Wilma was firm in his principles. "Well, no, but..." "Then this conversation is over," he said. "Tonight I will go to the agency's website and find a nurse." Realizing that her husband's decision to hire a nurse for his son was final and could not be challenged, Ingrid did not argue and nodded. "Well, that's fine," Wilma concluded. "Now I need to go to the office. Take care of Teo. If there's an emergency, call me." After completing some urgent tasks at work, Wilma hurried home. He trusted Ingrid as much as he trusted himself, but he felt calmer if Teo was by his side. As he drove over the bridge, he noticed a very young, poorly dressed girl. She seemed lost in thought, and then she swung her leg over the railing with the clear intention of jumping. Wilma slammed on the brakes and quickly got out of the car. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted, pulling the stranger away from the railing. "Are you exhausted from living?" "Yes, tired," sobbed the girl. "This isn't life but just suffering." "Come on, let's go to the car," Wilma commanded. After a little hesitation, the girl obeyed. "What's your name?" Wilma tried to ask her kindly. "Corey," replied the girl timidly. "Corey, tell me, why does such a young, beautiful girl think that life is suffering?" "I'm pregnant," Corey whispered and silently sobbed. "Wow, congratulations," the businessman shook his head reproachfully. "So you've decided not only to ruin yourself but also your innocent child?" "My fiancé left me," the girl kept sobbing. "I trusted him, and he did such a cruel thing to me." "I see," Wilma nodded. "But that's still no reason to take your life and the life of your child." "It's easy for you to say," she sighed. "But I have no one to turn to, and I have nowhere to live." "What about your parents?" As it turned out, Corey's father left the family when she was 2 years old. Her mother raised her alone, and when Corey was 14, her mother met Bob. Bob moved into their house in the village and took care of all the repairs that needed to be done. He seemed to be a hard worker in general, and both the mother and daughter were grateful for his help around the house. The idyllic situation lasted for exactly 3 months, and then Bob started to have bouts of drunkenness that would last for months. "Mom, why don't you kick him out?" Corey asked. "Why do you need him?" "You wouldn't understand," the mother sighed. "Even though he's bad, he's mine." And then Mom got sick. The 4th stage left no chance of recovery. The woman burned out like a candle in a matter of months. Bob kept living with his stepdaughter. "I'm registered here, so I'm not going anywhere," declared the stepfather. Corey was not happy to live with Bob, who was basically a stranger to her, but she couldn't do anything about it because Bob was legally registered at their address. After a while, she met Steve. The young couple rented an apartment and began living together. However, the news of Corey's pregnancy did not make her boyfriend happy at all, and the poor girl moved out of the rented apartment. When she returned to her mother's house, she found it had burnt down. Bob said it happened because of old wiring, but Corey was sure it was because of his habit of smoking in bed. "I was desperate because I had nowhere to go and no one to ask for help." "There's always a way out," Wilma spoke slowly. "No, I'm not going to have an abortion," Corey said, shaking her head. "My mother told me never to do this because of my red negative blood type. Otherwise, I might never have a baby again." "I see," Wilma sighed. He was puzzled. Unlike many businessmen, Wilma Castro had not lost his ability to feel compassion for the people around him, and he wanted very much to help the stranger. But how could he help her? "And what can you do?" Wilma asked. What do you mean? Corey frowned. You think if you have money, you can. The girl did not finish her thought and looked indignantly at Wilma. The man looked at her perplexed, and when he finally realized what she meant, he laughed. Wait, Corey, Wilma laughed. Did you think that I wanted to offer you intimacy? He looked at her, and the girl blushed. Okay, I should be more clear. Will you come work for me as a maid? The man asked. Do you need a maid? Well, you could say that. Wilma nodded. I do have a maid, but she doesn't suit me very well. What's wrong with her? Corey inquired. What if I'm not right for you for the same reason? I hope that's not the case, the man smiled. My former maid is, shall we say, overstepping her boundaries, but I'd still like to know what skills you have. Corey was silent for about half a minute, then she said, I did 4 years of medical school, but I quit as soon as I found out I was pregnant, and my boyfriend betrayed me. Oh, Wilma exclaimed. Why didn't you take a leave of absence? Well, everything came at once. I just couldn't take it. I see, he said, and then it hit him. What if I hire this girl as a nurse for Teo? 4 completed courses or something, Wilma thought, and explaining the situation, he offered Corey a job. Oh no, she said, afraid. I'm afraid that I can't handle it. Didn't they teach you anything in medical school? Wilma widened his eyes and added, I can't believe this. Corey kept refusing, but the natural gift of persuasion possessed by the businessman did its job. When the girl finally agreed, she felt both joy and shame. Just a minute ago, she didn't want to live, and now she had found a job and a roof over her head. You never know where you'll find it or where you'll lose it. Ingrid, on the other hand, was furious. She did not take the stranger's appearance in the house easily. Why do you need this homeless woman? Exclaimed Wilma's perplexed wife. Why the hell did you bring her? She'll only make things worse. What makes you say that? Wilma asked calmly. Corey has an unfinished medical degree. If she had finished medical school, she would be an excellent therapist. The most important word is unfinished, Ingrid said angrily. Ingrid, do you really think I'd hire Corey if she didn't have any knowledge at all? We had a chat during the ride, and then we visited Teo's doctor. He has instructed Corey and is convinced she is the right person for the job. I don't know, Ingrid threw in irritably. She is just an undergraduate doctor, and she's pregnant. Honestly, I was shocked by your decision. Darling, I know how careful you are about Teo, but trust me, everything will be fine, Wilma assured her. I don't think so, Ingrid thought but said nothing. Corey gave the impression of a person who knew her job despite not being a qualified doctor. She quickly made the same diagnosis as the visiting doctor. Corey noticed that the child's living quarters were excessively damp. Most likely, his frequent illnesses are due to this, she suggested. Changing the room and belongings should improve the situation without the need to move to the camp. What a smartass, Ingrid thought angrily. She wanted nothing more than to avoid living under the same roof as some ragamuffin. However, Wilma stood his ground. His intuition told him Corey's presence would bring benefits, and he was right. Teo loved Corey, if not as his own mother, but as a good, kind relative for sure. But as they say, trust but verify. Wilma decided to reassure himself by installing the camera. First, he needed to confirm Corey's trustworthiness. Secondly, he could monitor his son's well-being during his business trips. While in the office, he periodically reviewed the footage and was satisfied. Corey fulfilled her duties perfectly, and the child was not disappointed in her. The problem was only with Ingrid. Wilma was no fool and suspected that his wife was unhappy with the young nurse's presence. Ingrid tried to convince him of the nurse's lack of professionalism, and the man felt that something else was behind her attitude. Maybe Ingrid is just jealous, Wilma thought. When he first saw Corey, he didn't pay much attention to her appearance. However, when she had tidied herself up and worn new clothes bought with his advanced payment, Wilma noticed that she was quite attractive. Corey had long, light blonde hair, slightly slanted bright blue eyes, soft pink puffy lips, and a natural blush. Ingrid was beautiful as well, of course, but her beauty was the result of the work of a stylist, makeup artist, and hairdresser. People like Ingrid are usually considered stunning but not naturally beautiful. Perhaps that was the issue. I should bring Ingrid a more expensive gift from my business trip, Wilma thought. She loves that, and then we can travel somewhere to relax. I have to go on a business trip tomorrow, Wilma announced during dinner. It will be for a couple of weeks. Can you manage without me? Sure, honey, Ingrid nodded. You can be sure that there won't be any unpleasant surprises from my side. With that, she cast an unkind glance at Corey. Wilma sighed quietly. Here we go again. As he continued to observe his son and the nurse, he became more convinced that this girl was a godsend. Corey spent almost the entire day with Teo, showing genuine interest in his well-being. She regularly measured his body temperature and administered the prescribed medication. In short, she performed her duties to the best of her ability, and as for qualifications, she would definitely get her degree in time. But now, Wilma could only hope that Ingrid would change her attitude towards Corey. What unpleasant surprises are you talking about? Wilma smiled. The main thing is that you get along. Dad, Corey, and I already get along well, smiled Teo. Well, that's great, his father concluded. Ingrid continued to eat dinner with a sour expression. It wasn't that she was jealous of the nurse taking care of her stepson, but she feared that this obscure newcomer with supposed medical education might threaten her position. Ingrid saw only one way to get rid of the despised nurse: to frame her. But how? That was the question. Never mind, the young woman thought optimistically. There will be a way eventually. By the way, Ingrid said to Corey as soon as her husband had left for his business trip, from now on, you will eat in the kitchen, okay? The nurse shrugged, but the boy resisted. No, Corey will eat with us. Teo, while your daddy is away, it will be as I say, retorted the stepmother. No, the boy frowned. Ingrid wanted to scold her stepson but hesitated upon remembering the camera. It was one thing to put the staff in their place and quite another to yell at the child. Wilma never forgave anyone for that. Teo, she said in a sugary voice, it's necessary. Corey will eat in the kitchen. After all, the gardener and the guard eat in the kitchen, and there's nothing wrong with that. No, the child said, standing his ground. And you are bad. Teo, there is no need to argue, said the nurse, sitting down on the kitchen chair. I'll eat in the kitchen, and then, as usual, I'll come to you. It's really no big deal. All right, the boy nodded after a little thought. After breakfast, Corey took Teo out for a walk. Meanwhile, Ingrid tried to solve the issue of the suddenly appearing nurse. Think, Ingrid, think, she said mentally to herself. There must be some way of evicting this beggar from here. She went up to her stepson's room, intending once more to air it out. Just then, Ingrid's gaze fell on the camera. Of course, how could I not have thought of that? Ingrid's plan was a piece of cake. She purposely placed her purse in the boy's room so that it would be visible on the camera. Ingrid was sure that Corey would take the purse and return it to her, and then she could convince her husband that his protégé was an ordinary thief. The plan was set. Corey noticed the purse and, assuming it belonged to Ingrid, decided to return it. Is this yours, Ingrid? She said, holding out her find. It's Mrs. Castro, the woman said arrogantly. Mrs. Castro, is this your purse? Corey repeated her question with faint irony. Mine, Ingrid nodded and, opening it, exclaimed, it's empty. Where is my money? I don't know that, Corey said resolutely, guessing what the arrogant woman was hinting at. I found this purse in Teo's room and brought it to you at once. Whether it was empty or had something in it, I didn't look. But I did, and there were $1,000 and credit cards in there. Oh, you've cleaned it out. Yeah, I'm such a fool to take the money and return your empty purse, Corey remarked with a chuckle. She wouldn't allow anyone to humiliate her or accuse her of something she didn't do. How should I know what's in your head? Grumbled Ingrid. I think you went somewhere away from the camera, took everything out, and then pretended you weren't involved. Get out of here. Thieves don't belong in a decent home, and with the money you've stolen, you can count it as your severance pay. But I didn't take any money, retorted Corey, her voice trembling. I don't want to listen to your lies, Ingrid said with her brow raised. If you don't get out of here within 15 minutes, you'll have to explain everything at the police station. Believe me, it'll be more difficult for you. Who do you think they'll believe? Me, the wife of a decent businessman, or some beggar half-doctor? Corey realized it was useless to argue and went to her room to pack her things. Ingrid followed her, watching triumphantly as Corey packed. Everything had gone according to her brilliantly simple plan. The nurse, swallowing her tears, left the room and then the house. She was glad Tayo hadn't seen her leaving, but the rest of her life seemed bleak. The little money she had in her wallet was enough only for a couple of nights in the cheapest hostel. Corey was again faced with the problem of what to do next. When Wilma heard from Ingrid about Corey's crime, he was discouraged, to say the least. He didn't want to believe it, and couldn't. He had helped the poor woman as a human being, and she had repaid him like this. It was beyond his understanding and faith in people. After watching the tape, he was convinced that his son's nurse had taken Ingrid's wallet from the table. But did Corey take money from it? That was the question. On the other hand, Wilma had no reason not to trust his wife. Yes, Ingrid disliked the nurse from the first sight, but baseless accusations would be too much, even for the disgruntled Ingrid. Besides, Ingrid loved Tao, wished him well, and couldn't help but notice that Corey's presence in their house was good for him. Yes, the camera couldn't confirm the exact theft, but the fact that Corey had the purse in her hands was undeniable. You know, when a person is tight on money, they may go for a lot more than that, Ingrid said. How do you know what kind of trouble she's really in? Maybe she owed someone money. What do you know about her besides? Wilma knew his wife had a point. No matter how much you feed a wolf, it's still looking at the woods, he thought, reluctantly admitting the possibility that Corey did steal the money. After her conversation with Wilma, Ingrid drank white wine with exotic fruits, gloating over her victory. You've lived in a decent house and slept on clean sheets. It's time to return to your usual good-for-nothing life, she thought viciously. Where's Corey? Tao asked when his stepmother entered his room in the evening. Corey doesn't work for us anymore, Ingrid shrugged and opened the window. Why? The child asked plaintively. Because your darling Corey has stolen my money, Ingrid said eagerly. You're lying. Corey's good. You're bad, Tao retorted. If you don't want to believe it, I don't care, Ingrid said, grinning. Close the window, please. I'm cold, Tao asked. All right, Ingrid replied after a little hesitation, and she closed the window. The next day, the boy felt sick again. I feel bad, Tao complained. Well, what's the matter with you now? Ingrid rolled her eyes. The boy was flushed, and his eyes shone with an unhealthy glow. Give me the syrup, Tao asked quietly. What kind of syrup? Ingrid exclaimed. You don't even know what kind of syrup. The boy cried in despair. Why did you kick Corey out? I've already explained to you that she's a thief, Ingrid said sternly. Not another word about her. Do you understand? Tao was smart beyond his years and guessed he wouldn't get what he wanted. It's better to wait for Daddy, he thought. Ingrid gave him the syrup and left the room. She wanted to open the window, but the boy said he was very cold, so she didn't do it. Tao began to wither. It wasn't just the illness, he felt that only Corey really cared for him. His daddy, of course, loved him very much, but worked a lot and couldn't spend enough time with him. Ingrid didn't care about him. All she cared about was herself and Wilma's money. As for Corey, after such a dishonorable discharge, she had fallen on hard times. After spending 2 nights in a hostel, she went in search of some kind of accommodation. She hoped the world wouldn't be devoid of kind people. What if someone will take me in for a loan? Corey thought hopefully, or offer to help them with household chores in exchange for a roof over my head. However, her hopes were fading by the minute. No one was willing to lend her a corner. Still, Corey tried not to despair. What else could she do? She decided to visit the neighborhood where she and Steve had rented an apartment. People often rented out apartments there for very low prices because it was a high-crime district. Miraculously, she got lucky, though it could hardly be called real luck. The man who agreed to lend Corey the tiny apartment lived in the next one, and he was a heavy drunkard. The apartment was filthy and smelled of stale cigarette smoke, but it was better than living on the street. I expect the money in a month, said the drunk landlord. Deal, Corey nodded heartily, hoping to find some work. The main thing was not to inform potential employers about her pregnancy. During her job search, her landlord would visit her home from time to time and ask about money. "But it hasn't been a month yet, has it?" Corey invariably answered, suspecting the man needed money for booze, and the sooner the better. Finally, Corey managed to get a job at a food delivery service. "We pay weekly," the administrator informed her. Corey nodded happily. She couldn't have dreamed of such luck. The pay was good, and by her calculations, she should be able to pay the rent on time. After working for a week, Corey filled the fridge and put aside money for the rent. But unfortunately, that was the end of her bright streak. One day she got sick at work. Corey was leaving the shopping center loaded with products to deliver and fainted. The frightened administrator called an ambulance. "In your condition, it's not normal to carry such heavy weights," said the doctor. "You're at risk of miscarriage, so you'll have to stay here for a couple of days." Corey sighed heavily. She had only worked 2 days this week and wondered if she would be paid for her work. No work again, no money. Corey thought sadly, "How will I pay the rent?" The only positive thing was that the hospital was much more comfortable than the shabby apartment. She called the landlord and asked him to wait an extra week, mentioning she had gotten to the hospital. Of course, he was already being overly kind to her, but she was hoping for his extra favor. However, this time the man didn't want to get into the poor woman's problems. "I don't care. Do you have any money at all?" he interrupted Corey's stream of complaints. "Yes, in the kitchen cupboard under the blue teapot," she replied, hoping that the landlord would be convinced of her solvency and make concessions. What a naive girl she was. "That's good," the man said, visibly pleased, and added, "I'll take all the money. That's 1 month's pay and my moral compensation for the long wait. And you should not come back here again. I don't need such irresponsible tenants here. Where can I get the key?" Corey answered gloomily, "At the city hospital. I'll leave it with the lady on duty." "Why aren't you eating?" Ingrid asked, watching her steps and pick at a plate of pasta with a frown. "I don't want to," Tayo mumbled defiantly, pushing the plate away. The boy longed for Corey very much but realized he shouldn't talk about her with his stepmother, otherwise she would start cursing and calling her a thief again. "How are you?" Wilma cheerfully asked the household upon returning from a business trip. "Fine," purred Ingrid, kissing her husband. "Yeah," he smiled. "That's great. Where's Tayo?" "He's in his room," she replied. Seeing his son, Wilma froze with his mouth open. To be honest, he didn't even immediately recognize Tayo. The boy had turned pale, shriveled up, and looked unfortunate. "Are you sick again?" the worried father asked. "Dad, can Corey come back?" replied the boy, a tear rolling down his pale cheek. Wilma was confused. "Son, I would love for her to come back, but it's impossible," he replied in despair. Wilma looked at his wife as if asking her if Tayo knew about the theft. Ingrid barely nodded. "Daddy, I know that Ingrid thinks Corey stole the money," said the shrewd child, "but that's not true. She's good and Ingrid is bad. I was cold and she opened the window." "What are you talking about, good or bad?" Ingrid couldn't take it anymore. If only it were that simple. "Ingrid, don't yell at the child," Wilma said quietly but firmly. "I'm sorry," she stammered, "but you should understand." "I understand," said the husband. "When I left, Tayo got sick again. Isn't that a reason to listen to his request?" Ingrid couldn't believe her ears. "Are you going to hire her again?" "I'm considering it," the wife replied calmly. "And then I'd still like to hear the other side of this case." Without delay, Wilma began his search for Corey. It didn't seem easy as she had no permanent address. All he had was the address of the apartment she shared with the father of her child, but they had broken up, and it was unlikely she would go back to him after such a betrayal. Though she might have acquaintances there, it's worth a try, Wilma reasoned. There are no other clues yet. The neighborhood looked shabby, and the successful businessman looked like a man from another world on its streets. Wilma showed Corey's picture to the locals, but people just shrugged their shoulders. He was about to leave the place empty-handed. When luck smiled on him, Wilma nodded in gratitude to the woman of about 40 in a flowered dress and washed-out sweater. "Yes, I saw this girl yesterday," she confirmed. She rented an apartment in that house over there on the first floor. Thank you very much. Wilmer thanked the woman and made his way to the building she had pointed out. At the entrance, he encountered 3 drunken men and asked, "Guys, have any of you rented an apartment to a woman named Corey?" "Let's say it's me," one of them replied, flashing a smile that revealed his few remaining teeth. "Or is it really you?" Wilmer inquired. "Yeah, she was my tenant," the man replied, eyeing Wilmer with curiosity, clearly hoping for some money. "Whatever you ask, as long as the information is useful," Wilmer offered. For $50, he learned that Corey had indeed rented an apartment from the man, but had been asked to leave due to non-payment. "And where could she be now, do you know?" Wilmer asked, though not expecting much. "The day before yesterday, she was at the city hospital," the man replied. "She called and tried to get me to wait another week. I said no, I'm not a charity organization." "I see," Wilmer nodded again, taking out money from his wallet and walking away. What kind of jerk would you have to be to kick a pregnant woman out of an apartment? He thought indignantly. Although, what else could I expect from a marginal? However, he was more concerned with another point: if Corey had stolen the money, as Ingrid assured him, then how come she had nothing to pay for this rundown place? The answer was clear: Corey hadn't stolen anything, and Ingrid hadn't paid her a penny. Wilmer felt deeply embarrassed. Corey had worked for him for almost a whole month, doing her job perfectly, and Tao not only recovered but also grew attached to her. "I just have to find her," Wilmer thought as he headed to the city hospital, praying that Corey was there. Threatened miscarriage, Corey smiled sadly as she recounted her ordeal to the businessman. His heart sank from nervousness and concern, "And I ended up getting sick right at work. That's how I ended up here," she explained. Wilmer mentally cursed the situation. This wasn't what he wanted for the woman who had worked diligently for him. "If only we had handled things differently at work," he mused, raising his eyebrows in bewilderment. Corey nodded as Wilmer began. "This very dismissal is what I want to talk to you about. It's a very delicate issue." He paused, unsure of how to proceed. "Mr. Castro, I didn't take your wife's purse." "Well, I did, but I didn't look inside. I just wanted to give it to her," Corey interjected, desperation evident in her voice. The businessman sensed her sincerity. "I believe you," he said quietly. "And I want to suggest that we go back." "But your wife won't let me work," Corey interrupted uncertainly. "I'll take care of my wife," Wilmer assured her. "Good, then I agree," Corey nodded. "Well, now rest and take care of yourself." Wilmer smiled. "We're looking forward to seeing you." With great effort from the doctors, Corey's pregnancy was saved. Wilmer and Theo came together to pick her up upon her discharge. "I'm very glad you're coming back," little Theo said seriously, looking at her. Seeing Corey, Ingrid pressed her lips together unhappily but said nothing. "Oh, these setbacks," she grumbled mentally. "They are rarely tenacious creatures. You close the door, they come in through the window." There was nothing to set Corey up again, Wilmer reflected silently. He wouldn't believe it anyway. Tao quickly began to recover, his cheeks rosy and health returning. He loved going for walks with Corey, visiting the zoo, amusement parks, and other places perfect for young visitors. One day, while in the park, Tao and Corey found a puppy, whom they adopted and named Finn. Wilmer was pleased, but something still troubled him. "Corey, you're like a magician," Wilmer commented one day. "Tao seems stronger and happier now than ever. What are you doing with him?" "Miracles." No, Corey replied embarrassedly. "No miracles." When Tao was moved to another room, the optimal air temperature and carefully selected medications made a significant difference. Wilmer recalled Tao's comment about Ingrid opening the window and wondered if it had contributed to his frequent illnesses. He had often wondered why Tao's room seemed damp, initially blaming construction errors and even considering legal action against the builders. Now, a chilling thought crossed his mind: what if Ingrid intentionally cooled Tao's room? She had also insisted on sending Tao to a health camp. Wilmer hesitated to accuse his wife outright and decided to order an independent examination. He hoped fervently that he was mistaken, praying he hadn't married a woman capable of endangering their son's health. The strain in their marriage became apparent. One day, Ingrid casually brought up whether it was appropriate for servants to dine at the same table as the hosts. Maybe, Wilma replied calmly, but Corey has become part of our family for Tayo and me. She saved my son, for which I'll be grateful for the rest of my life. Ingrid frowned, tears welling in her eyes. Okay, I finally get it. Since you don't need me here anymore, it's time to end this charade, Wilma. I'm filing for divorce, she declared, rushing upstairs to her bedroom. Wilma was taken aback by her sudden proclamation. He knew Ingrid didn't truly intend to divorce him. It was a manipulative tactic. She expected him to chase after her, begging for forgiveness. Her condition would likely be the dismissal of Corey. But Ingrid underestimated Wilma. He willingly signed the divorce papers and even offered her everything she was entitled to. Nothing. Be grateful I didn't accuse you of taking money from the safe, Wilma remarked coolly after the proceedings. And you thought I wouldn't notice anything. Ingrid shot him a hateful look, but it had no effect. Well, my dear, Wilma continued, unfazed, note that it wasn't me who filed for divorce. With that, he handed her the results of the independent examination and bid her goodbye. I wish you happiness in your search for another fool, Ingrid spat angrily as she walked away, her heels clicking loudly. To hell with you. As she stood in her rage, Ingrid's mind raced with thoughts of revenge. You forget worldly wisdom, he laughs best who laughs last. That same evening, armed with a can of gasoline and a lighter, Ingrid headed towards the house where Corey and Teo lived. Inside, Corey and Teo were engrossed in board games, while Finn, their dog, happily roamed about. They were waiting for Wilma, who was due back any minute. It smells burnt, Teo remarked innocently, sniffing the air. Corey, too, caught the scent of smoke. Then horror struck as flames flickered through the window. Corey, I'm scared. Teo cried out in fear. Stay calm, my darling, Corey reassured him, picking him up swiftly. We need to get out now. They dashed towards the exit, knowing they had little time before the fire blocked their escape route. Corey placed Teo safely on the grass outside and took a moment to catch her breath. I've called the fire department, a neighbor shouted, rushing towards them. Is Finn okay? Teo squealed in relief at the sight of Finn. Corey couldn't bear to leave their beloved pet behind. Without hesitation, she plunged back into the blazing inferno. Moments later, a deafening explosion echoed as the house collapsed like a house of cards. Meanwhile, racing down the street, Wilma couldn't believe his eyes. His cherished home, now engulfed in flames, stood as a stark symbol of destruction. He parked hastily. Where's my son? Wilma shouted anxiously, leaping out of the car. He's safe at the neighbor's, a firefighter reassured him. We're trying to contain the fire. Wilma rushed towards the neighbor's house, his heart pounding with fear for Corey and Finn. Corey, he called out desperately. The little one, Teo stammered tearfully, still in shock. And Finn. They took her to the hospital, a firefighter informed him. She's seriously injured. Wilma hurried to the hospital, where he learned Corey was stable. Her hands and feet were burned, but her life and pregnancy were not in danger. Thankfully, Corey had managed to escape through the kitchen's emergency exit just before the house collapsed. Sitting by Corey's bedside, Wilma held her hand gently. She slept under sedation, her face peaceful despite the ordeal. It was then that Wilma realized how deeply he cared for her. I never had the chance to tell you that I love you, Wilma whispered softly, his voice filled with emotion. The house, destroyed by the fire, was beyond repair, but fortunately it was insured. Security cameras had captured Ingrid setting the fire. Due to her declared insanity, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital rather than facing jail time. Corey's condition improved daily, and one day Wilma visited her with Teo by his side. Why did you risk your life like that? Wilma asked quietly. It was Teo's favorite puppy, Corey replied with a smile. And we found him in the park. Besides, we're responsible for those we tame. Then you're responsible for me, Wilma said tenderly, taking her hands in his. After everything, I've realized how dear you've become to me. I won't let you go anywhere else if you'll have me. Corey underwent a rehabilitation program, and in time, they married. On New Year's Eve, she felt the joy of motherhood as they welcomed a baby girl into their family. That new year became the best in Wilma Mastro's life. His family was truly happy, and their love grew stronger, making every hardship worth enduring.